Good morning. I'm Rachel Murphy. I'm Director for Scotland with CoMoUK. Thank you so much for joining our event this morning. We will be talking about the EV vision document from Transport Scotland and getting a couple of expert opinions on what it looks like and crucially what it means for shared transport. Just a bit of housekeeping from me. This event is being recorded and will be available to watch back afterwards. So just to make you aware of that. In terms of our panel today, we have some really great speakers that I'm really excited to introduce. And I really hope that we are able to give quite a holistic understanding of the situation. So our speakers today are Morag Haddow from East Lothian Council, McAdam from Enterprise, and then from CoMo, our very own Matthew Ledbury. We are really keen with this event to build as good an understanding as we can of what shared transport needs to thrive as part of this EV vision, so that when we're writing our response to the consultation, we can make sure that we have the best, most well-rounded view possible. So please do share your thoughts, your ideas in the chat, pop in questions as we're going through the event. And we're just really keen that we put together the best response from our sector that we possibly can. I'm now going to stop talking. I'm going to hand over to Morag to share what's happening in East Lothian. Morag, thank you so much. And I'll hand over to you.
Oh, I'm just trying to work out how to share my screen. Sorry, I thought I had this all sorted.
That's perfect, thank you.
Does that work? Everybody can hear me?
Yep, can hear and see, thank you.
Yes, so I'm Morag Haddow. I work for East Lothian Council, and I'm going to talk about how we're developing our Journey Hub network to support what we hope will be a shared transport future. Journey Hub is our term for what I think is known in the trade as mobility hubs, but we didn't feel that resonated so much with the public. So Journey Hub is what we've gone for. Trying to move on the slides. There we are. So just a bit about East Lothian. If you don't know where we are just a small local authority to the east of Edinburgh. We're a unitary authority, as all the local authorities in Scotland are. Our population is just over 100,000 and rapidly growing. We've got a lot of new development, including a new town that we're building maybe 5 miles out of Edinburgh. We have 6 main towns, population of about 7,000 to about 20,000 in each town, so 6 small towns, and all of our majority of our commuter flows are into Edinburgh. We're fairly rural. As I say, a lot of the towns have got new developments around them. 70% of properties have driveways, so easy to implement car charging from that point of view. But obviously we have historic town centres and other harder areas for providing car charging. And the single trunk road that goes through East Lothian is A1 connecting Edinburgh with London. So we're developing a number of projects in parallel. There's the Journey Hub network, which is still in its infancy. We have a few Journey Hubs, which I can talk about later, Journey Hubs in development. Working with partners, bus operators in particular, who are continually improving their services. We've got excellent local bus services, 5 independent operators in East Lothian, and we meet regularly with them, very good working relationship. And Sestran, which is a South East Scotland regional transport partnership, are developing a mobility as a service app, which we are partnering in, and it will feature our Journey Hubs as key nodes in that network. We're also developing our vehicle charging network. We don't talk about EV charging anymore. We're making the assumption that all cars are electric, and those that aren't soon will be. So we're just talking about vehicle charging, cars, vans, and hopefully buses. So we'll focus on that aspect of our work just now. So most of the chargers in East Lothian are provided by the local authority. We don't have a lot of commercial interest at the moment. We divide their chargers into 3 different types, which have different purposes and different parking restrictions associated with them. They're intended for different uses. So the high power chargers, the journey chargers, are intended for people passing through, people topping up in emergencies. They're not really intended for regular charging of vehicles. They are much more expensive. We're just about, on the 1st of July, we'll be putting up our prices to those, for those to 40 pence and 50 pence per kilowatt hour. The destination chargers are in our town centres. We'll talk a bit more about the locations that those are in, but they're intended for mostly for overnight parking. There's restrictions on parking there during the day, which limit people to 4 hours, but they're mostly intended for overnight parking. And then our on-street charging again is intended for overnight parking, trying to bring chargers close to where people would normally park their cars in residential streets, retrofitting them into our historic town centres. So we had a 5-year plan, which is largely complete. We have at least 1 alpha hub per town. That consists of 2 rapid chargers. There's a bit of redundancy there in case one is not working or one is full. And a destination charger, which is there as a bit of a backup, or if people want to actually get out of the car and go to the shops or something. So we have 1 alpha hub per town. In addition, we have quite a number of beta hubs, which are the destination chargers. They tend to be in school car parks, community centre car parks, council car parks for commuters going into Edinburgh potentially. And then each town has a backup rapid charger if, for example, you can't get to the alpha hub because of roadworks, or if it happens to be full, or for any other reason. We do have some backup single standalone journey chargers. But the element of the programme that we're working on most just now is installing the on-street chargers in residential areas. And this is a completely different approach that we're taking there. So just a summary of where we've got to. We've now got over 150 chargers. I think it's the highest per head of population certainly in mainland Scotland. A number of these are journey chargers. Most of them are destination chargers, and our on-street charger fleet is rapidly growing and will soon be the highest number of chargers. But these are low power chargers. These are 3 to 7 kilowatt chargers. They're very much intended for overnight charging. Commercial operators are few and far between. There's a couple at restaurants and that kind of thing. And Osprey are I've got 2 sites now in Dunbar and Haddington, which are on the A1 corridor. Obviously, they see a market there, people stopping off on their way north or south. So we reckon we've got a really good, diverse network for all needs. It's resilient. It does work. We have good back office systems in place, and there's certainly lots of capacity in the network. And that's just a picture of our on-street chargers. That's Ryan's car. Ryan is not able to be here this morning. He's on leave. So I've stepped in, but you'll see Ryan's car in most of the photographs. Ryan's been leading our installation programme and really driving this forward. So I'm stepping in as a replacement for Ryan, and I'll try to answer any technical questions. But if I don't know the answer, I will be taking them back to Ryan. So just to give you an idea of what these look like, this is an example of an alpha site in Tranent, and as you can see, Murray, we've got a space waiting there for a car club vehicle should that materialise. No charger yet, but it's on its way. But there's 2 rapid chargers there, one charger per bay, and a space for the car club vehicle. Now the car club vehicle charger will be a lower power charger, but it's deliberately positioned there beside a rapid charger so that if the car club user turns up and for some reason it's not been plugged in correctly, or there's not enough gap between the bookings, then there will be a rapid charger. We would hope be a rapid charger available to top up before they head off. This is an example of what we called an Omega site. It's an additional standalone rapid charger. This is in a part of Musselburgh, where high density residential area, lots of flats. difficult to provide sufficient on-street charging in that area, so rapid charger seemed appropriate. This is an example of one of our beta hubs. There's a couple of destination chargers in our town centre car parks or community centre car parks, where people might leave their car, go shopping, come back after 3 or 4 hours. Another example of on-street chargers in one of our villages. No parking restrictions on these at all. These are just car chargers at the curbside. Anyone can park there, electric or otherwise, plug in. These are all accessible by RFID card. You can't pay with a credit card on these chargers. You need to be a member of the charging network. We've just recently moved them from Charge Place Scotland on to, some of them are on a Fuse network and some of them are on Connected Care, but they are intended for local people. So you will know the network of the charger that's around the corner from you, and you would need to be a member in order to access these chargers. And this is what you might call our flagship site. This is our high-power chargers at Wallyford. The 2 chargers are 150 kilowatt capable chargers. They're intended for flying visits, people passing through. They've also been designed so that you can charge a long vehicle there, or a vehicle with a trailer or a bus, a small bus anyway. Looking to develop that site a bit further in the not too distant future, but this is what as it stands at the moment. So our approach to providing charging infrastructure has very much been data driven. We worked with Energeo, a software provider, to analyse the housing mix, the housing patterns that we have in East Lothian, to identify the best places where we're going to need chargers in the future, to try and intelligently position them as efficiently as possible. So this analysis Energeo has carried out for us has done some AI to identify households that it thinks have got a safe place to park, households that may have a safe place to park and charge, and households that really don't look like they've got anywhere that they can sling a cable to and charge their car. So this is an example of a housing estate from the 1990s to the 2000s, where policy at the time was to provide all new houses with driveways. So that's easy from the car charging point of view. Everyone can just charge their car at home. If you come to a bit more modern housing, where the trend is not so much private parking, for more shared parking, which is better in terms of encouraging people to leave the car at home. It's not as convenient as having a car on your drive. There's a lot of shared parking courtyards. Those parking courtyards tend to be factored by a private company, meaning that there isn't really a role for the local authority in providing chargers in these areas, because the car parks are private, so we can't go in there and put chargers in. It is for the residents to get together with their factor and figure out how they're going to charge their vehicles communally. This is causing a few issues, because people do come to us and they expect us to be able to put chargers in, but if they're not our car parks, then we can't. We haven't found anyone actually taking forward factored charging yet, but it's something we have a lot of discussions around. And then moving on to our more historic town centres. This is Dunbar. The area on the to the west is council housing from the 1960s. There's a lot of terraces, very little parking. Actually, not so many roads. Most of these houses are just, on footpaths off the main road. So there's, that's a challenge in terms of providing charging infrastructure. This is an area. These houses are Victorian houses, again built without driveways. At least they have on-street parking, but the on-street parking is very tight, and finding spaces to put, and the footways are very narrow. So finding spaces to put chargers is challenging. And the hardest areas in lots of ways are the historic town centres, the high street, high density housing, flats above shops, that kind of thing. So these are the sort of challenges we face in trying to put together a charging network that is needed. And then we have villages. This is a village. We have a lot of villages, a lot of conservation villages, that it's important to preserve the character of those villages. This is a village of maybe 20 to 25 houses. You can see there are maybe 5 houses that don't have driveways. Is it worth providing a charger, a council charger in the back and beyond for 5 properties? Probably not. So when we get requests from places like this, we'll engage with the requesters, explain the strategy, suggest maybe some of the houses do have the potential to form drives. Now, whether they would be able to form a drive or not is is another debate, because if there's a conservation area, then they may not be allowed to form a drive. But a property like this, which is off the main road, probably have the option of forming a drive. This one potentially, I think it's open at the front, potentially has the possibility of forming a drive. This one, which is quite a historic setting, probably can't form a driveway. And certainly the ones at the back, there's no road to form a driveway onto. Solutions for places like this could be just like talking to your neighbours and sharing your charger, or formalising it through something like Charge My Car, using that app to to share private charging facilities with neighbours and visitors. And the other thing we've done is we've issued guidance on on cable covers. Now, I'm well aware of the issues with cable covers. We wouldn't be promoting these in town centres, in places with high pedestrian footfall, but potentially in a village situation like this, where you've got a rural footway, which is narrow anyway. People tend to walk on the road. It's not heavily trafficked by pedestrians or cars. It is a potential solution, and it allows people to buy and operate an electric car. So we have issued guidance on cable covers, which is available on our website. And then I have another section of my talk on journey hubs, but I think you were going to pick that up later, Rachel. So will we just leave it there just now?
Yeah, that's really helpful, Morag. Thank you so much for that. I think it's really great to have an understanding of sort of the context in which we're seeing, all this EV infrastructure growing. And I think East Lothian's a brilliant example of that. Murray, we'll come to you next, but just to sort of put a question in, Murray, I don't know, when you were looking at the really helpful maps with the green, amber, red, if you, like me, are looking at the red and thinking that needs a car club, because I think that's definitely where my mind sort of initially went. It'd be interesting to kind of get your perspective on that, and then it would be great to hear your presentation as well. Thank you, and thank you, Morag.
Yeah, certainly. Just on that point, Morag, yeah, that kind of analysis that's getting done at the local authority level, yeah, it would be great for us to be able to tap into that as an industry, and be able to look at that kind of potential, especially a lot of what we can do I wouldn't say pie in the sky, because there's a little bit more to it than that, but we do have a lot of data on our side that we use, but it's only insular data that we have. So yeah, that the cross use of that data would be very helpful in that, and obviously we're having conversations that Morag touched on already with East Lothian at the moment. But yeah, I'll just kick on at the moment. I don't want to make it too much of a car club show, because I think there's some great conversations that we can be having this afternoon. But I just wanted to work out how to start the slideshow. And we're off. Perfect. So for anyone that doesn't know me, my name is McAdam. I'm the head of business rental and mobility for Enterprise Holdings in Scotland and Northern Ireland. Within that, I look after our car club operations and also contracts, what we're doing in the mass and mobility space. Firstly, I just wanted to touch on the mobility landscape. Enterprise as a company very much see ourselves as part of the mobility landscape. We've been in Scotland ourselves for just shy of 25 years as a car rental company, purchased City Car Club 6 years ago, so that we could offer our customers different forms of mobility. The car rental market has always done the same. People have shared cars that they don't own. But what we've done through Car Club is we've enabled that to be automated and be managed by the end user. Just on our stance on mobility as a whole, it's all about collaboration, public and private. This is how we're going to really make inroads forward. And the core of the end user or the consumer, if we look at it this way, it's all about behavioural change. So how can we make things easy in the right places, as Morag was speaking about before, to ensure that we can enable that behavioural change. I suppose just a question to pose to everyone ahead of this and the discussion. Obviously, we're looking to reduce vehicle kilometres driven in Scotland by 20% by 2030. So if everyone just thinks, I suppose, what is their role? How can they help towards that? That'd be really good. So yeah, just touching on collaboration, public and private operators, we need to share this space in this market. We don't need to fight over these end consumers. We've got some stats later on, and CoMo share them every year, but we already know that people who bike share, also car share, they're more likely to be using public transport and working on the modes that we want them to be going on. Got a couple of pictures just on top this year, just to highlight here, that it looks like a moped. I think this is our e-scooter. I did question this one internally yesterday, but I think this is for scooter sharing there. Nothing against electric mopeds personally either, but I think the scooters are going to come into the market a lot quicker. So just a couple of things to touch on. Don't want to bang on about it. We obviously have the Go High Live app live through the Mass Investment Fund at the Highlands and Islands. Phase 2 of that, we are going to be introducing a minimum of 6 electric vehicles. Hopefully with further EU backing, move that closer to 12. They'll be coming in the next 3 to 6 months. Further to that though, and as we've touched on, I think Rachel's going to be going on to it, mobility hubs is certainly something that enterprise are very interested in, and we have an active role in them. So Morag's already talked about the Journey Hub at Musselburgh, where East Lothian hosts a vehicle for us, a very high performing vehicle on our side from an electric vehicle. Another example here is just on the bottom picture on the right hand side is work that we did with Imperial College in London. Now, realistically, this wasn't a large capital venture ultimately, but what we did is we introduced 2 zero emission car clubs, so one electric and one hydrogen, but we also put that alongside our partners Brompton Bike Hire. I suppose the main part from that is that a number of people, especially in that area, didn't actually have the requirement for 4 wheels. If we look at it that way, they could do a lot of their journeys through bike hire itself. But further to that, when they're doing a more complex journey or a further journey, they had the ability to rent an electric or hydrogen vehicle from ourselves, but with the capability of putting the Brompton bike in the rear of the vehicle, so that when they get to their end destination, if they're going on holiday or weekend away, they've got the bike as and when required going forward. We as a company have also rolled that out within one of our London city centre branches, and are just about to bring that up into Scotland at a couple of key locations. So we will offer Brompton bike hire as well as car hire from some of our car hire locations. Don't want to bore anyone with the current state and talking about fleet, because that's what we do, but realistically as a company, enterprise run about 150,000 vehicles in the UK. About 80,000 of them are commercial vehicles, all Euro 6 compliant and moving towards electric. Just touching on a few things at the moment within our marketplace, and more specifically the car club. So vehicle acquisition, we're all aware of it. Supply is still very low. We're also seeing, though, this does bring opportunity for us with the lease market also having this low supply. So it means that we can try and make that behavioural change, whether it be in the business to business or business to consumer market at the moment. As a company in Scotland, we've increased our zero emission fleet by greater than 140 cars since November 2021. We already have contracts in place to be introducing at least another 100 electric vehicles into our car club over the next 12 to 15 months as well. One thing that's still out there with vehicle acquisition is the residuals. Those who have worked within the EV space, realistically still trying to really work out what that used car market is for them at the moment. Used car market at the moment is the highest it's ever been. The demand there is absolutely huge. So it's quite difficult probably in the next 18 to 24 months to really dial that down. But we would expect maybe late 2023, 2024 to start to get a feel for that. And then the other part of that is the speed of change. So as discussed, we're on 150,000 vehicles in the UK, just under 2 million worldwide. We are aiming towards the 2030 new vehicle pledge. We are aiming to get that. On top of the car club, this is probably our easiest route to market to make that change. An example I always share is from our Edinburgh city centre location, we operate over 200 vehicles with 6 parking spaces. Now, it doesn't take Morag's presentation to let us know it's going to be pretty difficult to get those charged and back out to customers, but we are working very hard on that at the moment. Just touching on a couple of things, cost of living crisis, and obviously on the back of that, COVID. So from CoMo UK's work, 73% of car club users agreed that car club membership has saved them versus private ownership. So we're in a really good place at the moment with that as well. 27% of them stated that the reason they joined was exactly for that, saving money. So in the current market, we do know that we we do have a really good opportunity to grow our member base across the UK. The one of the things though is the cost of living crisis also does hit us as an operator. So we are actually having to look in as well the cost of fuel and the cost of running our vehicles, and make sure we never override that price parity, and make sure that we're always the cheaper option. It does though, the cost of living crisis also has given us another greater opportunity, because not only in the local authority, in the public sector market, but in the private sector market, we're starting to see and hear a lot of noise of people who have previously used mileage reimbursement for business travel and grey fleet, wanting to move away from that. They don't see a cost parity in using their own vehicle and being reimbursed the current rate with the fuel prices as they are. So that opens up a great opportunity for us. Specifically with EVs, it's all about operations in the customer journey. We need to ensure that the first time any member uses an electric vehicle, that it's a great experience, so that they come back to use it again. A lot of us in this call will drive EVs ourselves, and we're quite comfortable with the network, we're quite comfortable with the range and things, but especially for a car club user, we need to kind of step them in. So I'm going to touch on a few extra things on the next slide on that. For us, yeah, service level is going to be key for this behavioural change from private vehicle to ownership, or secondary ownership, or even third car ownership into car club. And the assurance, not only in the vehicle itself and being able to use it, but also the network that you're using. So whether that be the host charger or be the public infrastructure that's used during the journey, they need to have that confidence, as all EV drivers need to make that real leap of faith and change. Just on infrastructure and property, first and foremost, one thing we must caveat is we are a vehicle rental company. We're not a charge point operator. We do have knowledge in it. We have people with very good skill sets within our company to assist us with this, but we are reliant on third parties with this. Currently, in terms of our infrastructure and our property portfolio, we are making enhancements to all of our business rental, our rental branches across the UK. We've got 6 in the last 4 months that have been upgraded to having charging on site. Now that's twofold. At the moment, that's used to host electric vehicles through Car Club, so that customers get the option to either come in or self-serve and have them available 24/7. But it's also us looking at how we start to electrify our fleet in the rental space. At the moment, I don't want to say it's by hook or by crook, but we've kind of worked with different private and public infrastructure in the past, whether that be arrangements with local authorities or arrangements with private infrastructure that's been put in. Transport Scotland have provided a lot of assistance over the last 3 to 4 years, with giving us, I suppose, private infrastructure for ourselves as car clubs. Another route to market, as Morag was touching on as well, is yes, there isn't planning guidance at the moment regarding this, but we're actually finding a lot of developers are approaching ourselves as a car club provider and looking to add additional benefit into their development. So one of the ones, the one at Blindwells that Morag discussed before, we're already in conversation with the developer themselves to bring that facility in there. Another few CoMo stats here, and this is all about, and the main thing we really want to do here is we're wanting to ensure that the transition is smooth for the customer. So as you can see, 81% respondents are satisfied when driving an electric vehicle car club. That does drop when it comes to the external chargers from what they're using there. So enterprise, as most other car clubs do, we currently operate a back to base model. So realistically, vehicle is in a bay, comes back to that same bay. For EVs, this includes destination chargers or overnight chargers, anything ranging from 3 to 22 kilowatts as a base for the car club. As a company, we're currently reviewing a number of other models. So for example, the vehicle not be based at a charge point itself, but within proximity of them. But the main thing that we're coming up against, we have trialed this in multiple different cities at the moment, but the real connections about that customer experience. And that's the main thing that we're really trying to drive. We need to ensure that we provide a reliable service. And at the moment, off of the back to bay model, it's becoming somewhat challenging, not only because we're working in a market at the moment where the personal ownership or the lease ownership of electric vehicles is going through the roof, and there's a demand in the network, and we understand that. A couple of other things that we have done as a company, though, especially with moving that transition across and with the growth, we're looking at more than a quarter of our fleet going electric next year. So we've been working on enhanced guidance, so that make sure that the end user or our member gets guidance through their reservation, to give them kind of hints and tips regarding the electric vehicle. We've introduced live state of charge, so whenever any of our members go onto our app and they're looking to book an electric vehicle, they'll get the state of charge it is currently. So especially with a last minute booking, that's live on our app. also through our mass platform and through the desktop itself. One of the things that, and it was working with Morag and Ryan at East Lothian Council, using RFID cards and ensuring those RFID cards are connected directly to that charger. Realistically, I suppose, can be seen negatively by the public, but linking our charge card and our car to that charger, it just takes away another part of the policing, whether that be by the local authority or by a third party policing the bays, that as an EV user goes into the bay, they're not going to get charged. So they're going to most likely move on, ensuring that that car club can get back to its base and get charged again. And we've also created a number of user videos. At the moment, we're buying so many different electric vehicles, it's hard to keep up, but we're making sure that there's small hints and tips user videos through our website and on the reservation confirmation, just to ease people into using electric vehicles. Now, don't get me wrong, there still are operational problems. There's still a lot of AA call-out charges for running out of battery, but we would expect this, and these are kind of just what we see as teething problems as we grow our electric vehicle fleet. As discussed before, Enterprise operate with a number of charge point operators across the UK, and we also rely on accessibility to additional public infrastructure. We're more specifically seeing that success in Scotland. On average, we're seeing our EVs doing 35% more miles per trip than we're seeing down south, which is great. And I think that's hats off to Transport Scotland and the CPS network that we have in place. But I suppose from our side as an industry, not only in the car club, but the car rental, we do need to see that continue to increase. Another part there, and Morag did touch on it, accessibility to charge points is big news at the moment. There's a lot of conversation around it, and rightly so. One of the things that we had as a company through our car club is that previously we had accessibility to car club, but if you had any further needs, we'd refer you to rent a car to deal with. So whether that's putting on Lynx hand controls or anything like that in our vehicles. In the last 3 months, we've actually now included something called a surrogate driver scheme. Now, that means that someone can become a member of our car club, even without a driving license, because they may not be fit and able to drive, but they can have up to 3 drivers who are notified within their account so that they can continue to be mobile and have accessibility to these vehicles that they didn't have previously. Might be a bit of a controversial slide here, but again, really looking to open up comments and conversation afterwards. So listen, the network for shared transport, first and foremost, massively welcomed by Enterprise as a company. I think it's another positive move forward, especially with the news that preceded that regarding grants for vehicles and the grants for charging drying up pretty fast for the personal user. A couple of ones we probably want to pop out there. So 1 in 4 new chargers or destination or slow chargers, all right, could they be used for shared use? Is this actually even possible? I think it's not even looking at the new infrastructure that's in place, but could we review the current infrastructure in place? So how are local authorities currently reviewing that and looking at the performance of those charge points? Could this be better utilised? Now, I may put a caveat here. Speaking on behalf of car clubs, we're not saying that we're going to fill every single one of these. We always would have to look at it as a business case in a catchment area, but it certainly would be a starting point that a very easy route to market, I believe. Second one, the hubs approach and integration. So community-based hubs for ease of use by the end user. We think that these are going to be pivotal to drive change. We've kind of repositioned our branches. Our branches have always been based in our community. As a car rental company, we generally operate 5 times the number of branches that our competitors do because we want to be based in the community. The car club gives us another extension of that, which is a lot lower capital and easier to set up and get moving. And then the third one there is just enhanced guidance. So enhanced guidance from central government to local authorities. I think one of the things we do have some local authorities that are really pushing on and sprinting on with these things, but we don't want others to feel like they're left behind, maybe if they're more rural, for example. And that guidance from central government or from CoMo themselves would really help and give them confidence in what they're trying to achieve. Other things to just look at with that bold statement, listen, there is a pressure for private demand. With low emission zones, with the market and manufacturers doing further offerings, Morag's already touching it. We would expect a lot of that will go to home charging, but we do understand that there is a reliance on the public network as well. I'm the epitome of that. Ultimately, I've not got a home charger. I've done 20,000 miles in electric vehicles in the last 16 months, so I very much use the public network when I'm using it. Another thing is regionalised. We understand that one size doesn't fit all. I think though we do have great examples where we've launched car clubs. It's now how do we move them to the next level and electrify them? We're running car clubs We're just about to launch an electric car club in Bucky, which wouldn't shout out as the normal car club area to go. We are looking at Morag. We've got vehicles in Ullapool, Wick, Thurso, Port Pale, Calsh, Kinross. We're kind of moving away from that city-based model. I suppose the next stage is make that initial behavioural change to sharing and the use of shared transport, and then look to how we electrify that from there. Next one here is just a truly shared car club. So multimodal shared use instead of the infrastructure. For EV infrastructure, can car club operate and continue to share that without a defined charge point? So that's really a question to us as an industry. How can we progress what we're doing right now to say that an electric vehicle car club doesn't need to be based on a charger at all times? Because there will always be an argument that's inefficient use. I'd counter that, but we'll go into that in a moment. Multi-user shared services, so shared use. So, and this isn't even primarily about EV car clubs, but shared transport as a whole. At the moment, as a car club, 80% of our membership and usage is through business to consumer market, otherwise known as the retail market, with only 20% of that being the business to business market. I suppose what we're really trying to push within that is that as businesses are striving towards whatever the goals they have in the private sector internally or public sector goals, will the low emission zones of people commuting make a difference to this? And also, will those pressures come into it? I suppose that leads nicely onto the 2025 emission zero. So moving local authority and government to zero emission fleets. How a holistic approach to the use of car club and shared transport can work towards the targets within mission zero. The endless bank will not subsidise everything. I suppose the best way of looking at it. Behavioural change has had to work. We've got some local authorities really striving ahead, others that are now trying to catch up. Do I personally expect that mission zero to get flexed a bit? Of course I do. We've had 2 years of being pretty dormant. But I do believe that there is a space for shared use of vehicles to, I suppose, lower capital outlay in the front end of purchasing these vehicles themselves. And especially as we're starting to see more shared services across the board. And the last touch on there is just scope 3 emissions. So as of April this year, all companies with greater 500 employees have had to report their scope 3 emissions. So indirect emissions that occur within their value chain, and that includes business travel. And we have seen a lot of the UK-wide companies that we deal with. We've really pushed the car club conversation and the electric car club conversation with them, but due to scope 3 emissions now needing to be reported, we have seen them now come back to us. So again, for us, it's another bit of a putting a hook out there and looking for a bite on that side. So yeah, no, listen, that's me. Open for conversations. I hope the rest of the call is going to be good for that. My contact details are on there, but more than happy to share them if anyone would like to have a conversation.
Murray, thank you so much. That was brilliant, I think, to kind of have a sense of where you guys are at. There's amazing things you're doing, but also, there's some really sort of good crunchy questions at the end there. I think what really stuck out to me was the mention of rural and the low emission zones and the cost of living. Like, I feel from a kind of just transition perspective, there's a real opportunity here to make sure that EV doesn't leave a chunk of society behind. And it's really interesting kind of how much those themes kept kind of coming up in your presentation. But we can come to that at the Q&A bit. Matthew, I will hand over to you so you can share what we're thinking at CoMo.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and thank you for the presentations we've had so far. I think Murray did a very good job of showing basically how car clubs can contribute here, and some of the figures I'm pleased to say I've actually got as well. So I'll probably brush over those fairly quickly, but hopefully I'll add one or two broader political points as well. And I'll try and keep this fairly short, I think, so we have a decent amount of time for some discussion. But if you just give me a moment. Okay, I hope you can all see that okay. Is that all right? Can you just confirm, Rachel?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Starting presentations, finding people can't see it when you can.
No, you're good. Can you go?
That's great, thank you. There we are. First of all, just a bit about EVs in car clubs. Murray quite rightly pointed out the 81% of people who are satisfied driving EV car clubs EV car club vehicles in Scotland. It's also worth pointing out the extent to which electric vehicles in car clubs are already so far ahead of what the population is as a whole. It's a significant area in which people are getting more familiar with being able to drive one and get used to one, which can help for those people who are actually thinking of buying their own as well. But it's definitely way ahead of the wider curve here. Again, I think some good figures there that Murray brought up as well. Suffice to say that the basic problem is with the charging experience. It comes in well below what the general satisfaction of driving is. This obviously is true in the wider public as well as it is with car clubs. I think the problem tends to be particularly bad in car clubs, though, from the point of view that in the wider public, people who own their own vehicles are likely in the majority of cases to have a charging point at home that they use and they're familiar with. And obviously in the case of car club users, you're much more likely to have to mix a whole variety of charging points, quite apart from the fact that you're likely to use one less frequently than a private user does as well. So the issue is particularly acute with car club users. I'll just cover very briefly one or two points, I think, why it's relevant in the wider context in terms of the use. And that's firstly in terms of actually reducing mileage. The effect of car clubs in doing this is quite clear. A significant percentage of people either don't buy a vehicle or get rid of one. They also help reduce overall mileage. And in the context of having the 20% reduction target we have in Scotland, this is one of the many things that can help contribute towards that. And in the context of the current situation with the cost of living, it's also important the extent to which car clubs can aid social mobility and ensure that people can afford access to a vehicle when having their own becomes more difficult. I think it's worth pointing out the Just Transition Commission that the Scottish Government had, which looked at the implications behind transiting to a net zero future and the implications behind that. And it's one of the ways in which you can ensure that people are brought along with it and not feel left behind. I just wanted to touch on this as a reminder of really what's inspiring this discussion, and this is the EV vision that the Scottish Government has come up with. It's still in draft form, so if any of you out there want to comment on it and haven't done so, do take the opportunity. It's basically looking at the wider, bigger strategic picture. I've pulled out one or two quotes within it in terms of what it's trying to do. It's big picture stuff, which is good. Obviously, the difficulty often comes with these things is that the devil is proverbially in the detail, of course, and certainly from the point of view of car clubs, I think this is where the detail does need to be looked at, because as is often the case, it's too easy for shared to end up being marginalised or seen as peripheral benefits when it should be properly incorporated into the any future plans that are developed. And that's why I wanted to actually just bring in a couple of other relevant quotes from other Scottish policy documents. I think there are important here. This is from the 20% roadmap document. And I've highlighted the fact there that it does specifically look at the need to support car club vehicles as one of those that are looked at ahead of private EVs. So the wider benefit of this has already been recognised. And the other document that's particularly relevant at the moment is the National Transport Strategy, the latest delivery plan, which again emphasises the need to develop EV car clubs. So the wider support and the recognition is there, and it's important that the different areas of the Scottish Government do link up. As I'm sure many of you will be aware, ultimately we can have lots of grand sounding plans, but without proper infrastructure to back them up, it can be very difficult to actually deliver on them if we're not careful. And I'm just going to finish with three key recommendations that we're putting in our submission on the vision. The first is to create the idea of key users within it, and recognising that car club users should be seen as a key user group when it comes to infrastructure. And this was done in the case of London with their EV infrastructure strategy. And by creating this category, it means that you're ensuring that various different users are not ignored when it comes to developing your priorities, and ensuring that your key sense of direction is still being followed. So that's the first one. The second one, it should be blindingly obvious, but it's worth reiterating. It's the need for engagement. These things don't happen in a vacuum. People need to talk and to find out what actually are on a local basis, in particular, the specific needs that are there. And this needs to be clearly laid down as a requirement. I think particularly with local authority plans, that there does need to be proper consultation and involvement with the different user groups to ensure that the network that's rolled out does meet the proper needs of people. And the final one is looking forward. Don't forget, it's not just about cars. We're at quite an exciting time, I think, in terms of where transport is. Obviously, a very challenging one. But one of the key things is the way that new modes are coming forward. And I've put there a nice picture of the 3 e-scooters. Not something you'll see like that in Scotland much at the moment, unfortunately. Obviously, we still have the situation north of the border that we don't have any official trials, and so that those that you do see are private ones that are unregulated. So on public roads they are completely illegal, but in the absence of any proper enforcement, it goes on. The point is, it shows that the desire is there to use them. They're probably going to be legalised in England and Wales in the next 12 months, where there's already the trial schemes going on, and it's quite clear that in Scotland this is an area that needs to be taken forward. But e-scooters, as with e-bikes as well, obviously their charging needs aren't as demanding as those are for cars, but at the same time it's important that provision for them is built in, so we're future-proofing where the general direction of vehicle use is going. So it's important this isn't forgotten about. And I think from my point of view, that's it. I've tried to keep it quite quick, and so allow a bit of time for discussion.
Brill, thanks so much, Matthew. Murray and Morag, if you could come back on screen so I can quiz you with some questions, and a reminder to those in the audience, please do pop any questions that you have into the chat. I think one of the first things that I wanted to touch on was, Murray, your 1 in 4 target. I was hoping you could kind of give us a bit more information about how you guys have kind of arrived at that number. You mentioned, is it possible? How possible does it feel to you? Is there a more possible number? And then Morag, to kind of get your perspective from a local authority point of view. But Murray, if we could come to you, 1 in 4, how do we get there?
Perfect, Rachel. Yeah, so we have done analysis with some local authorities on this. Quite a lot of it's been south of the border, but I've done it with a couple in Scotland. The reason for the 1 in 4 was really looking at occupancy of current 7 kilowatt chargers. Now, the 1 in 4, I also do believe, can we go into the more rapid network and just take away from just being car clubs. Like it's not all about us. It's about our taxis also being electrified and having access. It's about the capacity that we'll require for electric bikes in whatever form that comes in as well. So yeah, I think, listen, is it an ambitious number and a bold number? Yeah. Have we thrown it out there a little bit? Of course we have, but yeah, one of our things, we need to be bold and ambitious to get that scale up. We do have a very large scale up happening in the next 12 months in Scotland, which is a large proportion of that 100 vehicles that I've spoken about, and it's really changing people who already have that shared mindset into a zero emissions mindset. So one of our things that we do obviously have to be very clear on, a touchdown, that we will not come in, we do not know the groundworks, we're not experts in the background stuff. We are linking now, especially down south, but we are starting to feed into Scotland now with private charge point operators and approaching local authorities as a partnership. So, for example, saying, they would put in 4 or 2 double-headed. Out of that, what they request is 3 to 5 years of a TRO and being allowed to operate in your streets, but 1 in those 4 will be a car club. And a lot of the work that we've done before that was so that we could actually bring together some kind of commerciality with CPOs to go and work in partnership, especially when launching a car club for the first time in a town or city.
That's really helpful, and I think it's great to kind of understand the logic of that. And I think you're right, you know, it isn't just car club, is it? As Matt mentioned, it's different modes. I think that's part of future-proofing it as well. And of course, Morag, you have e-bikes in East Lothian.
Yeah, we do have e-bikes as well. If I could just comment on that 1 in 4 charging spaces to be car club spaces. So we've got around 150 chargers. If you wanted to come and put 40 car club cars in East Lothian, Murray, I'd be very happy to accommodate that.
There we go. Business is in front of you guys. This is all like this collaboration in action.
And you know, absolutely, it makes sense, because we are, as you know, targeting the chargers in areas which don't have the ability to park at home, which, as you say, are likely to be hotspots of people who may use car club vehicles as well. So yeah, we very happy to have those discussions and open up. And you know, there's no point in having, you know, if there is a car club with that we fully appreciate needs a dedicated charger, we will mark it on the ground and make sure that is kept free for car club vehicles. And those processes take a little time to work through, but yeah, absolutely, very happy to do that.
Brill, thank you so much, Morag. Mark, your hand is up. I'm guessing you have a question.
Yeah, I do indeed. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm on the headphones. Yeah, it's a kind of question for Murray, I guess, around moving into new territories. You mentioned the likes of Kinross and whatnot. Is that driven by local authority provision of EV charging in these areas, and therefore you move in, or are you moving in a business case in the first instance, and then the charging infrastructure's coming in behind it? And I guess the other part of the question is it EV driven, or is it just, sorry, I don't say just, is it car club driven? Excuse me, with, you know, the EV provision side of it coming in behind that?
Perfect, Mark. Great question. So in terms of where we're operating and looking to operate, there's a bit of both. So an easy route in, well, not an easy route in, a very labour intensive route in, is that it's opened up in a tender. We as a company approach that tender because that decision's already been made by the local authority, and we look to win it that way. Another way is that we begin to operate, and whether that's through acceptance or assistance through the local authority, or we go through private sector to do that. So we do operate a lot of vehicles on private land, also through developers. Now, Mark, you touched on a really good point. I think Kinross is a great example of that. So realistically, the local community council reached out to me, reached out to the company, it came down to myself. They were looking to provide car sharing within Kinross. Now, this kind of worked perfectly as well in the back end, that COVID had hit, people had moved to working from home. The number of people that were starting to live in that area was huge. They're probably only going to be commuting once or twice a week. And it was getting rid of that second vehicle ownership. So what we did with them at the time is the fastest and easiest route to market was, right, get me a temporary TRO in one of your public bays and we'll put a hybrid vehicle in. Like we will not introduce anything realistically apart from a standalone hybrid or an electric or hydrogen if need be in the area. What we're now doing with them though is we've now made that business case over the last 12 months. We're now approaching the council to say, well, actually, listen, within your public infrastructure, you've got low usage of infrastructure in this area. You've actually got a bit of an issue yourselves with your travel and how to run your electric vehicles in that area. Let's look at how we can now scale this up and make it not only accessible for the public when the public require it, but also accessible for themselves, the NHS in the region, and also other private sector companies where the people work and commute from there. A lot of the work that we've done during COVID, Mark, is this is roll on from the car rental side of our business, but we now heat map every single month and put it towards a large file of where are we doing a lot of delivery and collection to people's home address. I'm not speaking out of turn by saying that no car rental company want to deliver and collect a vehicle. We could not put a price on it for how expensive it is for us as a business to do. So what we're really trying to do is integrate those people that we were driving 30-mile round trips, which is not great for our carbon footprint either, and just getting those people to self-serve in their community. We're very open to anyone to approach us. Is probably the best way of looking at it. We do have a big. We have just we went through tender and won the Aberdeen contracts. We now got a great presence in Aberdeen. That's now opening doors to say, right, I need the Elgin Murray area, because then we cover the whole of north of Scotland and we can really make that change up there. But yeah, listen, open for anyone to reach out, and we'll look at it. Realistically, can make a business case for anywhere. One of the things that I'm just looking to do at the moment is bringing the car clubs into Morag. We'd never have thought about it previously. It just wouldn't work. But with our connections through Transport Scotland, a light connection through CalMac, and what we're doing through the GoHi app in the High Trans area, it's now a no-brainer for the company, and it's all about just dotting the I's and crossing the T's.
Thank you for that, Murray. That was super comprehensive. I had a question for Morag, and we've got a question in the chat. Morag, you mentioned 2018 to 2023. That was the 5-year strategy. Can you give us any sort of sneak peeks into what the next strategy, the next 5 years will look like? Do you think it will be sort of a continuation of the same, or are you imagining any kind of radical changes?
Yeah, it's going to look very different. The government funding is drying up. It's moving away from direct funding to local authorities into partnership funding. So we're looking for commercial partners to operate and maintain our charge points going forward. So we've laid the groundwork. We've now got a lot of sites identified. We've got the power supplies into a lot of sites. Those sites can be expanded, and then we're looking to move into lease agreements or maintenance agreements, or whatever format that takes, with commercial operators, who will it's a lot of discussion to be had. It's exactly how long that lease is going to be, whose responsibility is what, which elements that they want, which elements can be commercialised, and which areas are always going to be like the bus services. A lot of buses, or most bus services, are commercial services, but occasionally the council has to step in and provide those socially necessary services. So which bit does the council have to do? We don't see ourselves as being a charge point provider in the long term, but we don't know what it's going to look like in the future.
That makes a lot of sense. Murray, you were nodding enthusiastically there. Do you want to kind of come in on that point? Yeah,
listen, I think as a country, we've catapulted ourselves forward. The stats are great and what we've got there. But yeah, as Morag just said there, it's not up to the local authority to be doing this. I think the faster we open up to a commercial market and bring the private sector in, as long as the regulation part there, and especially regulated tariffs to an extent, is somewhere in the background, I think that's a really valid point, and we are aware, obviously, through kind of requests for information, etc., that are going out within the marketplace right now, that a lot of the local authorities are preempting this and moving forward with it. So it's very positive.
Wow, what a great moment to be talking about this. Go for it, Matt. Sorry.
I was going to say, just to add to that, now, obviously one of the key points of the vision is this idea of wanting to lever in large amounts of private sector funding, which is, I think, quite understandable, because obviously it's going to be quite an expensive job putting in all the infrastructure that is needed. As is ever, of course, it's a question of getting the balance right, that the interests of the private sector would obviously left themselves would focus on the most profitable areas, whereas what we need is to make sure we have an EV infrastructure approach that works for everyone and for all users. So it's getting that balance right. But I quite agree that we can't and we shouldn't expect local authorities to deliver on all this. But obviously on a local basis, it's local authorities that have got the knowledge of the area and the better awareness of what all the needs are that the private sector inevitably won't have.
Yeah, and if I could just come in there as well, I mean, we own a lot, but we don't own, but we maintain a lot of the public space, and the places where you might want to put chargers comes under the responsibility of the local authority. So there are opportunities for us here as well to divest ourselves of that maintenance burden for the chargers, to allow private companies to make a profit on selling the electricity, and for us to generate an income through some kind of lease agreement. But the other thing that we are trying to be very careful about is that we need to ensure that people who don't have driveways, now in East Lothian, it's about that only 30% of properties don't have driveways, but in cities such as Edinburgh, it's more like 70% of properties don't have driveways. So you don't want those people who don't have driveways to be penalised by having to charge at 4 times the price of people who can charge privately. So we do want to have agreements that allow us to have some control over for prices, tariffs, maybe different rates at different times of day, or membership schemes, or whatever. So we're certainly in the middle of a lot of discussion.
We may have lost Morag there. Oh no, we maybe got it back. Sorry, Morag, we just missed like the last 2 words of that sentence. You kind of kept us on tenterhooks there. We have a question in the chat from Stuart, who says, really interesting to hear the references to just transition, clear opportunities for car clubs to give better access to EVs for those who can't afford to buy their own or who see cost savings. Is a specific approach needed to persuade those on higher incomes to move away from private ownership? So that's a really great point. Obviously, we're doing, I think, a brilliant job of kind of making sure that we don't forget those communities and areas of deprivation. But what about at the other end of the spectrum? How do we make sure that, this, oh, Murray's got his thinking face on.
Yeah, so I think when we look at, listen, the car has been an extension of the person for a long time. It's became behavioural norm. It's what people have done. Now, if income isn't an issue and you can afford to run your car and you can afford to drive into the low emission zone and pay every day and you can do all that kind of stuff, we've seen it in London, who's had a mature market for ages. That market will continue to do that. I think there's no denying that. I think what, in terms of that person, this is more a transport sector as a whole approach. So what we really need to do is, and the message for them is, choose the right mode for the correct journey. So if the person does feel the need to own a big 4x4, Chelsea tractor, whatever you want to call it, and they feel that, and it's a status thing, etc., yeah, that's not a problem. But see, if you are literally nipping into something, are you using the tube or the train? Do you use public services? At times, would a car club be useful? Like, I think there's no, and I won't be speaking at a turn saying there's a large base. The largest base of our car club users in Edinburgh is in the Morningside area, a very affluent area. These people have already made that behavioural change because they've had the car club on their doorstep for 15 years. Do you know what I mean? And they may have an expensive car and they may be able to afford whatever they want, either 2 or 3 cars, but what they've actually done is they've made that conscious decision. So I think, listen, if people don't have barriers, they'll always do what they did before. Some barriers might stop some people, but I think it's more that the positioning of the services, and this is where I really feel that the ability as a service and connectivity will be the key part to really accelerate that forward. So making sure that it's not only publicised that something's nearby, but how does that connect to the greater mobility landscape?
Thanks for that, Murray. Matt, you look like you're about to jump in. I'll let you.
I'd like to. I think Murray made some very, very good points there, but because this is a very big, wide issue, of course, in terms of how we change our approach to transport and to living fundamentally. I always think it is a question of getting the carrot and the stick balanced, and the stick in this case is basically certainly in urban areas, you make it more and more difficult and progressively more expensive to actually own a private car that you use as the basis for pretty much all your journeys. Now, obviously, people who are particularly well off, some of them will always be prepared to pay that. But I think if it becomes just more awkward to drive to places and there's more restrictions, then obviously the attraction of wanting to do that becomes lowered. And so you balance that off against making sure that you're providing good quality alternatives. Obviously, a good quality comprehensive car club should be one of those. I'm always mindful of the fact that particularly in many European cities, the tram is a great leveller. It's seen as a top quality piece of infrastructure that's totally acceptable for anyone of pretty much any social level to use, and people use it because it's quick, it's clean, it's effective, it does what you want. So it's making sure there are good alternatives there. The final thing I would just add as well, I think, is it's worth looking at incentives that you offer people to move away. I think the idea of mobility credits is a good one. That basically you say to people, right, if you give up your car, and these are the things we'll give you to make it easy, be it free car club membership, be it the public transport passes. You know, there's a whole load of things that are possible to be considered, but we need to actively incentivize people as well to move away from owning their own personal vehicle, because ultimately it's a benefit to all of us that if people cease to do this, particularly in urban areas.
Thanks for that, Matt. I think it's a really well made point. We are in our last 7 minutes, so I am going to bring the conversation super smoothly to hubs. We heard, I think, from all the speakers, examples where using one mode of shared means that you're more likely to use another. And I think hubs are indicative of the fact that people, when they're using one mode, will look to use others, and those being co-located is a virtuous cycle that means that people use more shared. Now, Morag, you have a journey hub in East Lothian. Where do you see journey hubs and electric shared, be that car clubs or be that e-bikes, for example, in your case? How do you see those things fitting together, and what are your aspirations for the next 5-10 years?
I think exactly what you said. Bring things together. But we have a couple of journey hubs in name that are operating in East Lothian, but I think they don't look very coherent on the ground. We haven't got that brand, we haven't got that presence, we haven't got that landscaping that actually allows a sense of place where they're located. It's the case that all those things have been, we've taken advantage of funding opportunities as and when they've come up. So we need to raise the profile, we need to improve our brand, we need to improve our marketing, and we'll do that. And we're on that journey. We're working with the Regional Transport Partnership on the Mobility as a Service app, which will again help to raise the profile of the journey hubs. So I think we haven't gone down the route of having a high level strategy of planning lots of sites and then trying to shoehorn services into those sites. We are working much more organically and working with the bus operators, because the real linchpin for the journey hubs for me is the public transport service. And the public transport services are not easy to change. People have routes that they're familiar with, they use the bus to go to their work or whatever. You can't just divert a bus that's been running on the same route for 20 years. So we have to work with the bus routes that we've got. And so, we're just looking for the new town that we're developing is obviously a key location. That's where people are going to be getting new travel habits. And then we have other hubs that we're growing as and when those opportunities arise. But for us, over the next couple of years, really, it's getting that brand, getting that vocabulary out there, so people start talking about them, they know what they are, and they recognise one when they see it.
That's a brilliant answer, Morag. Thank you so much for that. Murray, from your perspective, mass hubs, the bigger holistic transport journey, what are you thinking?
Yeah, in terms of mobility hubs, listen, we are an operator. Like we'll be able to press releases for every single branch we open up and call it a mobility hub, because there's a bus line that goes by, there's potentially bike share, there's car share and car rental on site. I think further guidance for that, but as Morag touched on there, guidance can only do so much. Guidance is great when you've got a blank sheet of paper and we're building from groundworks up. Do you know what I mean? But a lot of these things at the moment, it's how do you integrate them into it? How do we even reposition things that are already there and create that? Listen, everything's channeling through this one area right now. Okay, so what do we maybe need to do there? Do we need to have some kind of pop-up coffee shop? Do we need to have as a public toilet or anything like that? Just something static that can actually create an area around it. I do, but listen, there's a great space for mass. I think that Transport Scotland have obviously highlighted this and backed it. I think that the hardest part of that is going to be getting a lot of different private sector working in cohesion with each other. I can remember going out and knocking on doors when the Mass Investment Fund came out at first and speaking to a lot of different people, and some people were very positive on it. Some others who maybe had a larger market share weren't as much. The connectivity has to work, and the connectivity has to work for the end user. Obviously, we put a lot of kind of eggs in one basket. It's a lot of app-driven, single point of purchase, which I think that's absolutely great. But the work behind the scenes and being involved in that project, trying to bring APIs in, we just got Northlink coming on. It took us 14 months to get them integrated. So bringing all these integrations in is key. But I do think that going forward, people having accessibility to multiple modes is the key. It's just about getting the providers of those modes round the table to understand that, right, okay, we've all got our own market shares, but it's a larger market which could probably put 10 or 15% on it, and we just need to share the consumers that are within it.
Bro, thank you. With a whole 3 minutes to go, Matt, you're looking at me. On you go.
It's going to be very brief. I was going to say, I think Murray's absolutely right that it's looking at how we coordinate all these different modes together. To me, that the transport future we need is one where you have a whole mix of shared and active and public transport and community transport as well, and that people can easily move from one to the other, both physically and in terms of planning journeys. So in that respect, mass and mobility hubs are really both vital for our future. I think just bringing it in the context of EV, that's why it's another thing that needs to be taken into account when planning EV infrastructure. Is basically we should be looking at where hubs will go, and ideally trying to use any EV planning as a way of kick-starting hubs where they don't currently exist. So you're looking at trying to create the future transport patterns you want, rather than just looking at solely in terms of being able to ensure that sufficient vehicles, there's sufficient charging infrastructure for vehicles. It does require quite a lot of hard work, as Mary says. You need to get everyone together, and people need to cooperate on this, and it's certainly not easy, but it's what we need, and now's a good time to do it, because we're putting in with EV infrastructure and with other elements as well, the transport infrastructure that will see us for the next 20, 30, 40 years.
I think that future proofing point is a really well made one and a great one to finish on. I would just say from me, with 60 seconds to go, thank you so very much to our speakers. It's really brilliant just to hear external perspectives. It shapes our work, and I'm sure it shapes people's thinking in the audience as well. So thank you so very much for your time. I would say as well, if you've listened and you think, actually, I have another perspective, and you want to share it and see if it's part of our CoMo response, then please do get in touch with me or with Matthew to tell us what you think. And we are all ears. We'll be putting our response in the next few weeks. So please do get in touch soon if there's anything you'd like to add. Thank you again so much to our speakers, to our lovely audience, and have a great day.